I was standing in the shower, the water still hot but the bathroom mirror already fogged over. I was soaping my hair, trying to remember if I'd bought more conditioner at the supermarket yesterday, when the water pressure suddenly dropped. I frowned, twisting the knob, but it didn't get any better. Then I heard it. A dull, rhythmic thumping noise from the bathroom wall. I pressed my ear against the cold tile, and that's when the whole world tilted that it wasn't just the pressure. The water was turning cold, and then it wasn't. I was wearing a different nightgown, one I'd thrown out 3 years ago because it had a hole in the sleeve. I yanked back the shower curtain. The bathroom was different. The shelf I'd installed was gone, the one with the plants that had all died. The expensive, soft as a cloud bath mat I'd bought for the renovation, it was gone, too. I saw the thin, ragged blue towel I used to hate. I smelled mildew. I stumbled out of the shower, my head pounding, my feet bare on the old, beige linoleum floor. This wasn't right. I was standing in the bathroom from 7 years ago. The house we just bought. The house I'd spent years fixing up, piece by piece, with my own hands and my own savings because Mark had been too busy. Too busy with work, too busy with meetings, too busy with late-night calls on the patio. He never had time for the drafts, the peeling paint, the sagging door frames. I did it all. I was the one who turned this money pit into a home, with a new kitchen and the soft close cabinets and the rain shower head I was just about to install in this very bathroom. And he left me anyway. For her. For a woman who wore designer heels and whose voice was perpetually breathy. A colleague. Of course. I remembered the discovery, the slow, dawning horror of it, the months of him saying he was working on himself, while I was covered in sawdust and plaster. I had poured everything into this house, thinking if I could just make it perfect, he would see me. He would stay. It was a lie. Now the thumping in the wall was back. Louder. A frantic, angry sound. It wasn't the pipes. I knew it wasn't the pipes. I knew this house in its bones, because I'd rebuilt it. I walked out of the bathroom, dripping wet, wrapping a towel around myself. The hallway was dark. I made my way to the living room. The hardwood floors were dull, scratched. The same ugly beige walls. I saw the old, lumpy couch that we'd argued over. And then I saw Mark. He was in the living room, on his knees. The old TV was on, static. He was reaching for the wall, his fingers scrabbling against the paint, his face pale and twisted. He wasn't wearing his work clothes, he was in his pajamas, his hair mussed, his eyes wild. He looked like a different person. When I called his name, a part of me wanted it to be a scream, but it came out as a whisper that he spun around. He was crying. I had seen Mark cry exactly once in our entire relationship, and it was when his mother sold his childhood home. This was different. His face was a mess of snot and tears and sheer, unadulterated panic. He pointed a trembling finger at the wall he had just been clawing at. It was a large, smooth expanse of beige wall, right next to the fireplace. I remembered it well. That's where I'd put the reading nook. I'd built the built-in shelves there. It's gone, he rasped. His voice was raw, like he'd been yelling. You can't see it, tell me you see it. See what? I asked, my voice cold. The water from my hair was dripping onto the floor. The beige floor. The floor I had torn up and replaced with beautiful, dark oak stuck to the wall. He slammed his palm against it. It was here. The door. You opened it. You put the door in. I just stared at him. I remembered that day. 5 years from now. I'd finally paid a contractor after saving for 2 years to knock through the wall and put in French doors to the garden. Mark had been on a business trip. He'd texted me a thumbs up emoji when I sent him a picture of the final result. He hadn't even looked up from his phone when he got home. He just said, "Looks great, babe." There's no door here, I said slowly, testing the words. My heart was pounding, but it was a different kind of pounding. It was an icy, sharp clarity. We're in 2026, Mark. Remember, this is the house we just bought. The one you said you'd help me fix up. Remember? His eyes darted around the room, frantic. No. No. That's all done. We did it. It was beautiful. You did it. The kitchen, the shelves, he was babbling, his words running into each other. He looked at me, a desperate hope in his eyes. Please, just tap on the wall. You'll hear it's hollow. That means it's there. The door is there. You just have to open it. It was a door. I remembered it. I remembered the lovely, solid wood door with the glass panels. I remembered the day I painted the frame a cheerful yellow. I remembered Mark, standing in the middle of the new room, a glass of scotch in his hand, telling me it was a bit much. That was the same week he'd started being busy with her. I'm not going to tap on the wall, I said. I walked over to the couch and sat down on the dusty cushion. My wet hair was soaking the fabric, but I didn't care. The house was a mess, and I had to fix it. I always had to fix it. But I wasn't going to fix it. I felt a strange, terrifying, exhilarating peace. I looked at him. He was my husband. A man I had loved. A man I had spent years trying to earn the attention of. I looked at him now, covered in the dust and panic of a reality he couldn't seem to hold on to, and I just saw a stranger. He wasn't my project. He wasn't my home. The house was a shell, but I didn't have to fill it up. Mark, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We just bought this house. You've been gone every weekend for a month. You said it was for work. I was going to start painting the living room next week. I already bought the paint. It's in the garage. But you know what? I think I changed my mind. I don't think I'm going to paint it. He looked at me, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. What? But you have to. It's ugly. It's wrong. You have to fix it. He gestured wildly. Everything is wrong. The bookshelves, the kitchen, the knobs on the cabinets. I'm not going to fix it, I repeated. The words felt like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. I'm not doing it. This is your house, Mark. You wanted it. You bought it. You fix it. He shook his head violently. You can't. You don't understand. I saw it. I was there. It was perfect. And now it's gone. You have to put it back. You have to put the door back. He was going on and on, rambling about a home office, a balcony off the bedroom that I had built, a fireplace in the basement. He spoke of a life we lived, a life I had constructed, with incredible detail and longing. He asked me about his clothes, his golf clubs, a brand of coffee he had apparently loved. He was giving me a list of things to fix, in the home I had already spent a lifetime fixing. I listened to his frantic demands, and with every mention of a new upgrade I had funded, a new room I had redesigned, a new appliance I had installed, the cold clarity in my chest grew. It dawned on me. In the timeline he was living in, he remembered the result. He remembered the beautiful home. He remembered the comfort and the ease of it. But he didn't remember the process. He didn't remember the years of work I did alone while he was out. He didn't remember how he dismissed my excitement, criticized my color choices, and never once picked up a hammer or a paintbrush. He wanted the finished product, the luxury, and the convenience. And he wanted me to build it for him all over again. He had no idea how to do it himself. He was a man in a house of his own making, and he couldn't even turn on the power drill. Mark, I said, cutting through his tirade. You want me to fix the house. But I'm not going to. I'm done. The silence that followed was total. He stared at me, his eyes blinking rapidly. What do you mean, done? His voice was small, almost childlike. I mean, I'm not going to help you, I said. I'm not getting the paint. I'm not calling the contractor. I'm not going to spend my weekends in the hardware store while you have important meetings. You want a door, you build a door. You want shelves. You buy the wood. You figure it out. He stood up, swaying slightly. You can't be serious. You're good at this. It's what you do. It's what I did, I corrected him. What do you do, Mark, other than show up and tell me it's a bit much? Tell me where the hammer is. Go ahead. It's been in the same drawer in the garage since we moved in. He didn't answer. He just stood there, his jaw slack, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a man who was panicking about a wall being missing. I was looking at a man realizing he was utterly helpless. He looked at the wall again, then at me, then back at the wall. The static on the TV was a low hum. The world felt unnervingly still. I got up, walked past him, and went to the kitchen. I didn't even look at the ugly, beige cabinets. I opened the fridge. It was empty, save for a half-empty bottle of cheap white wine and some takeout containers. I poured myself a glass of the wine. It was sour and lukewarm. I didn't care. Mark followed me into the kitchen. His voice was a hoarse whisper. You don't believe me. Do you? You think I'm crazy? I don't think you're crazy, I said, taking a sip of the wine. I think you're having a very bad day. But it's not my job to fix it. It was never my job to fix things for you. I thought it was. I thought if I just made the house perfect, you'd love it. You'd love me. But you didn't. You didn't even see it. You only saw it when it was done, and even then, you barely noticed. I noticed, he said, but his voice was weak, his protest pathetic. That you never noticed, I said, my voice sharp as a shard of glass. You never noticed me. You're noticing me now because you need something. You need me to be your contractor. But I quit. I'm not your contractor. I'm your wife, but I'm starting to wonder why. He flinched. I walked past him again. I went to the bedroom. The bed was unmade, the sheets a horrid, washed-out blue that I had bought at a discount store. I would have never bought these. I was furious with my past self. I opened the closet. All my clothes were boring, sensible, comfortable things. A woman who had given up. A woman who had stopped trying to be seen and just tried to be useful. I pulled out a suitcase from the top shelf. It was dusty. I threw it on the bed. Mark appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? What does it look like? I said, opening the closet and taking out a pile of my boring, beige, and gray clothes. I didn't want to wear these anymore. I didn't want to be her anymore. I started stuffing the clothes into the suitcase, not folding them, just shoving them in. You're not leaving, he said. It wasn't a question, but his voice was trembling. I am, I said. I don't want to be in this house. It's a wreck. And you're a wreck. And I don't have the tools to fix either one of you. Not anymore. Please, he said, taking a step forward. Just look. Let's just start from scratch. We can make it better this time. We can do it together. Together, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You don't even know where the toolbox is. You've never owned a level. You think a stud finder is a dating app. There is no together here, Mark. There's just you, standing in a house you can't fix, asking me to do it for you. He started pleading then, really pleading. He talked about what we had, what we could have. He talked about his work stress, how he'd been trying so hard to provide for us, how he loved me. It was all the words I had wanted to hear for 7 years, the words that would have made me melt and forgive him everything. He was the man I was married to, but he was a stranger. The man I loved was already gone. He was always going to leave. He left me in 1,000 little ways long before another woman came along. He made me feel like a ghost in my own life, and I had spent so long trying to be solid for him that I had forgotten I was the one who was disappearing. Now I was solid. I was solid as stone. Stop, I said, zipping the suitcase shut. I don't want to hear it. I don't want your words. I want you to get out of my way. He didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the doorway, looking at me with a mixture of despair and confusion. He looked like a man who had lost everything. And he had. He just didn't know it yet that I walked towards him, and he stepped aside. He was afraid of me. I was no longer the woman who would stop and listen. I was the woman who was leaving. I walked down the hallway, the suitcase bumping against my leg. I could hear him following me, his footsteps pattering on the ugly linoleum floor. I went back to the bathroom to grab my toiletries. I wasn't going to leave my shampoo for him. I was tired of giving him everything that. Where will you go? He asked. Your parents are in Michigan. You don't have a key to the office. I'll go to a hotel, I said. I have my own money. I have my own credit card. I have my own life, Mark. I think I forgot that for a while. I packed my toiletries. I didn't look at him. I walked back into the living room. I was done. I was leaving the house behind. I was leaving him behind. I paused at the front door. I looked back at him. He was standing in the middle of the room, his arms folded across his chest, trembling. He looked small and pathetic. I looked at the beige walls, the dusty floor, the ugly couch. I looked at the wall where, in a different life, I had built a reading nook. A beautiful, cozy place for a future I had dreamed of. It was just a wall now. And that's all it was ever going to be, as far as I was concerned. I'm going to give you a piece of advice, Mark, I said, my hand on the door handle. Since you seem to be having a hard time figuring things out. Stop trying to find the door. Start looking for the toolbox. I opened the front door and walked out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I got into my old, beat-up car, the one I'd been meaning to replace for 2 years, and I drove away from the house that I didn't know where I was going. I was 32 years old, with a useless degree in art history, a job I hated, and a husband who had emotionally left me years ago. I had nothing. I had no savings to speak of because I'd spent it all on a house that wasn't mine. I was starting from a place of absolute nothing. And for the first time in my life, I felt freed. I woke up the next morning in the motel room with a stiff neck and the taste of cheap wine still coating my tongue. The neon sign outside was still buzzing, casting a sickly pink glow through the thin curtains. For a solid 30 seconds, I had no idea where I was. Then I remembered. The shower. The wall. Mark on his knees, clawing at the beige paint like a man possessed. I sat up slowly, my body aching from the lumpy mattress, and I waited for the panic to hit. It didn't come. That I sat there in the gray morning light, waiting for the familiar knot of anxiety to tighten in my chest, the one that always lived there whenever something went wrong with the house or with Mark or with my life in general. The knot was gone. In its place was something hollow and quiet, like a room that had been completely cleared out. I wasn't sure if it was peace or just exhaustion, but I decided I didn't care. I swung my legs off the bed, padded across the stained carpet to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her hair was a mess, her skin pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. But there was something different in her expression. Something sharp. She looked like she was finally paying attention. That I splashed cold water on my face and made a decision. I wasn't going back to that house. I wasn't going back to Mark. I wasn't going back to any of it. The question was, what was I going to do instead? My phone was sitting on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw 17 missed calls from Mark. 5 voicemails. A dozen text messages that started with, "Please call me," and devolved into, "Where are you?" and "I'm losing my mind," and finally, at 4 a.m., a single line that read, "I need you." I deleted all of it without listening to a single message. Then I blocked his number. My thumb hovered over the button for a moment, and I felt a flicker of hesitation. 7 years of marriage, of shared history, of promises and plans. 7 years reduced to a single tap on a screen. I tapped it. The hesitation evaporated. I had a job to go to. I worked at a small art gallery downtown, the kind of place that sold overpriced prints to people who wanted to look cultured. My degree in art history was supposed to lead to something meaningful, curating exhibitions or writing catalogs, but instead I spent my days arranging frames and making small talk with bored housewives. I hated it. I had always hated it. But it paid the bills, and it gave me something to do while Mark was off being busy. I was supposed to be at work in 2 hours. I looked at my reflection again. I could go in. I could smile and nod and pretend everything was fine while my marriage imploded in the background. I could be the good little employee who never made waves. Or I could call in sick and figure out what the hell I was going to do with the rest of my life. I called in sick. The woman on the other end of the line, my manager Sandra, was about as sympathetic as a brick wall. Again, she said, her voice clipped. This is the 3rd time this month, Claire. I know, I said. I'm sorry. I just need a day. There's an opening tonight. New artist. I need you here to help set up. I can't, I said. The words came out firmer than I expected. I'm not coming in. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sandra was probably trying to figure out if I'd finally snapped. Maybe I had. Fine, she said eventually. But we're going to have a conversation about your attendance when you get back. Fine, I said, and I hung up. That felt good. I hadn't hung up on anyone in years. I was always too polite, too accommodating, too afraid of making anyone angry. I was a professional people pleaser, and it had gotten me exactly nowhere. I looked at the phone in my hand and thought about all the people I had let walk all over me. Mark. Sandra. My mother, who always had an opinion about everything I did. My friends, who had slowly drifted away because I was too busy being a wife to be a friend. That I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I just wasn't sure who I was going to be instead. I got dressed in the clothes I'd shoved into the suitcase last night. A pair of gray slacks and a beige sweater. The uniform of a woman who had given up on being seen. I looked at myself in the mirror and felt a surge of disgust. I'd worn variations of this outfit for years. Beige, gray, navy. Safe colors. Invisible colors. Colors that said, please don't notice me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was standing in a cheap motel room with no plan and no safety net, and I felt more visible than I had in a decade. I needed coffee. I needed food. I needed to figure out where I was going to sleep tonight, because I couldn't afford to stay in this motel for more than a few nights. I had a credit card with a modest limit and a checking account that was scraping the bottom. My savings had all gone into the house. The house that wasn't mine. The house I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into, thinking it would somehow make Mark love me. The thought made me angry. Not the hot, fiery kind of anger that burns out quickly. The cold, steady kind that settles in your bones and stays there. I had spent 7 years trying to earn love. I had renovated a house. I had rearranged my schedule around his. I had given up my hobbies, my friends, my sense of self, all in the name of being a good wife. And what had it gotten me? A husband who didn't even notice I was there until I walked out the door. That I was done earning. I was going to take that. I drove to a diner a few blocks from the motel. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't been updated since the 90s. I ordered coffee and scrambled eggs and sat in the corner, staring out the window at the gray morning. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a direction. But I had a feeling, a conviction that I couldn't shake. I was not going back. The waitress brought my food and I ate it mechanically, not really tasting anything. Halfway through my eggs, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before I picked up. Claire, she said, her voice tight with barely concealed worry. Your husband called me. He said you left. He said he doesn't know where you are. Good morning to you too, Mom. Don't get smart with me. What's going on? He sounded frantic. He said something about a door and a wall and you packing a suitcase in the middle of the night. I set down my fork. He called you at 7 in the morning. He called me at 6. I've been worried sick. Don't be, I said. I'm fine. I just needed some space. Space. Claire, you're married. You don't just take space in the middle of the night. What happened? I thought about trying to explain. I thought about telling her about the shower and the wall and the way Mark had been clawing at the paint like a madman. I thought about telling her about the affair, the years of neglect, the slow erosion of everything I had been. But I knew it wouldn't matter. My mother had always loved Mark. She thought he was a catch. A successful man with a good job and a nice smile. She didn't see the way he dismissed me. She didn't see the way I disappeared. He's having some kind of breakdown, I said finally. He's not making sense. I couldn't deal with it. A breakdown? What kind of breakdown? The kind where he thinks a wall is a door, I said. The kind where he's crying on the living room floor at 2 in the morning. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother processing, trying to fit this information into her carefully constructed narrative of my perfect marriage. Well, she said eventually, he's under a lot of stress at work. You know that. You should be supporting him, not running away. The cold anger flared again. I've been supporting him for 7 years, I said. I'm done. Claire, I have to go, Mom. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I finished my eggs, paid the bill, and walked out into the parking lot. The sky was clearing, the sun burning through the clouds. It was going to be a good day. I didn't know how I knew that, but I did that. I spent the morning driving around the city. I drove past the house we'd lived in before we bought the new one, the little rental with the creaky floors and the landlord who never fixed anything. I drove past the gallery where I worked, watching Sandra through the window as she barked orders at the new intern. I drove past the park where Mark and I used to walk on Sundays, back when he still made time for me. None of it felt like mine anymore. It all felt like someone else's life, a movie I'd been watching from the back row. I ended up at a coffee shop in a part of town I didn't usually visit. It was small and cramped, with mismatched furniture and a barista with purple hair who called everyone honey. I ordered a latte and sat down at a table by the window. I pulled out my phone and started making a list of things I needed to do. 1. Find a place to live. 2. Figure out money. 3. Figure out what I actually wanted. That I stared at the list for a long time. It was pathetically short. I had no idea what I actually wanted. I'd spent so long defining myself by what Mark wanted, by what my mother wanted, by what society expected, that I'd lost track of my own desires. I liked art. I liked making things beautiful. I liked the feeling of taking a raw space and transforming it into something warm and livable. But that was tied up in the house, in Mark, in everything I was trying to leave behind. I needed something that was just mine. The barista with purple hair came over to my table. You look like you're having a rough day, honey, she said. You okay? I looked up at her. She was young, maybe 22, with piercings in her nose and a tattoo of a sunflower on her forearm. She looked like she had her whole life ahead of her. I was jealous of that, for a moment. Then I realized I had my whole life ahead of me too. I just hadn't been living it. I'm okay, I said. I'm just figuring some things out. She nodded like she understood. Figured things out are overrated, she said. It's the figuring out that's the fun part. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me with my latte and my short, pathetic list. I looked at it again. Find a place to live. Figure out money. Figure out what I actually wanted. I picked up my pen and added a fourth item. 4. Stop apologizing that I didn't know how I was going to do any of it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a safety net. But I had a conviction, a stubborn, defiant belief that I was going to be okay. I had survived 7 years of a marriage that had slowly drained me dry. I had survived the discovery of Mark's affair, the slow death of my hope, the grinding exhaustion of trying to earn love that was never going to come. I could survive this too. My phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Claire, the voice was unfamiliar, a woman's voice, hesitant and nervous. This is Diane. Mark's. I'm a friend of Mark's. We work together. My blood went cold. Diane. The woman in the designer heels. The breathy voice. The colleague. I had never met her in person, but I had heard her name enough times to hate it. I had seen her number on Mark's phone, the texts he thought he'd deleted, the late-night calls I wasn't supposed to notice. What do you want? My voice was flat, emotionless. I'm sorry to call you, she said. I know this is weird. But Mark called me this morning. He's really upset. He said you left. He said he doesn't know where you are. He's not making a lot of sense, Claire. I'm worried about him. I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. You're worried about him? That's rich. I know what you think of me, she said. I know you probably hate me. And I don't blame you. But I'm not calling because of me. I'm calling because he's in bad shape. He's talking about things that aren't real. Doors that aren't there. A house that doesn't exist. I think he needs help. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her breathy voice and her designer heels. Another part of me, the part that had spent 7 years being a caretaker, wanted to rush back to the house and make sure Mark was okay. I pushed that part down. He's not my problem anymore, I said. If you're so worried about him, you can deal with him. Claire, I'm not going back, I said. And I'm not going to listen to you tell me how worried you are about the man you were sleeping with behind my back. So if you have something useful to say, say it. Otherwise, lose my number. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uncertain. I'm sorry, she said finally. I didn't call to make things worse. I just thought you should know. Know what Mark called me yesterday. Before you left. He was rambling about a house we never had. A life we never lived. He said you built him a door, and then it was gone. He said you were leaving and he didn't know why. He said he was trying to find the toolbox. I closed my eyes. The toolbox. That was my phrase, the one I'd thrown at him before I walked out the door. He'd remembered it. He'd repeated it to her. The thought should have made me feel guilty, but it didn't. It made me feel seen. He had finally heard me, finally understood what I was saying, but it was too late. Too much had happened. Too much time had passed. Tell him to figure it out himself, I said. He's a grown man. He can buy a toolbox. I hung up. I sat there in the coffee shop, my latte growing cold, and I felt a strange sense of closure. Diane had called me. The woman he'd chosen over me had called me to tell me he was falling apart. And I had told her to deal with it. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't the one cleaning up Mark's messes. I wasn't the one holding him together. I wasn't the one sacrificing everything to make sure he was okay. I was the one walking away. That I looked at my list again. Find a place to live. Figure out money. Figure out what I actually wanted. Stop apologizing. It was still short, still incomplete. But it was a start. I had a direction, even if I didn't have a destination. I had a conviction, even if I didn't have a plan. That I finished my latte, left a generous tip for the barista with purple hair, and walked out of the coffee shop into the bright morning sun. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know where I was going to sleep tonight. But I knew I wasn't going back. I knew I was going to figure it out. And for the first time in years, that was enough. I found an apartment 3 days later. It was a tiny studio in a neighborhood I'd never been to, above a laundromat that played oldies music all day long. The building smelled like soap and dryer sheets, and the apartment itself was barely bigger than a walk-in closet. The walls were a faded yellow that might have been white once, and the carpet was the color of mud. The kitchen was a single countertop with a hot plate and a mini fridge. The bathroom had a shower stall so small I could barely turn around in it. I loved it because it was mine. There was no Mark in this apartment, no memories of late nights spent arguing over paint colors or weekends lost to trips to the hardware store. There was no pressure to make it perfect, no expectation that I would transform it into something beautiful. It was a dump, and I was fine with that. For now, it was enough. The rent was cheap enough that I could afford it on my gallery salary, barely. I had to dig into my credit card to pay the deposit, but I figured that was a problem for future Claire. Present Claire was just happy to have a door she could lock behind her. I spent the first night in my new place sitting on the floor, eating takeout Chinese food out of the carton, and making a list of everything I owned. It was a short list. A suitcase full of beige clothes. A phone. A laptop that was 5 years old and barely functioning. A few books I'd grabbed from the house on my way out. I had nothing. I had never had so little, and I had never felt so light. The first week was hard. I went to work, smiled at the customers, arranged the prints, and tried to pretend I was fine. Sandra watched me like a hawk, waiting for me to crack. I didn't crack. I just went through the motions, counting the hours until I could go home and sit on my floor and not think about anything. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of the city outside my window. Sirens, traffic, the occasional shout from the street. The laundromat downstairs played Elvis Presley until midnight. It was loud and chaotic and nothing like the quiet, orderly life I'd had before. I loved it. The noise kept me from thinking. The chaos kept me from remembering. But I couldn't avoid it forever. Mark had stopped calling after the first few days, but the silence was almost worse. I kept waiting for him to show up at the gallery, to track me down, to demand answers. He didn't. I didn't know if that was a relief or a disappointment. The second week, I got a letter. It was in the mail, handwritten, with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mark's careful, neat script, the same script he used for work memos and grocery lists. I almost threw it away without opening it. I stood at the recycling bin in the laundry room, the letter in my hand, and I had a long argument with myself. Opening it would be a mistake. Opening it would drag me back into his orbit, back into the chaos of his emotions. But not opening it felt like cowardice. I had walked out. I had made my decision. I could handle whatever he had to say. I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long. Mark had written it in a feverish, almost manic style, his handwriting growing messier as it went on. He started with apologies. He was sorry for everything. Sorry for not noticing me. Sorry for the affair. Sorry for taking me for granted. Sorry for being blind and selfish and stupid. He wrote it over and over, the words running together until they lost all meaning. Then he got to the house. The letter shifted, became more desperate. He talked about the door again. The wall. The life we had lived that I didn't remember. He described it in excruciating detail, the reading nook with the yellow walls, the French doors that opened onto the garden, the balcony off the bedroom where we used to have coffee on Sunday mornings. He wrote about a kitchen with soft close cabinets and a rain shower head that I'd installed myself. He wrote about a house that was warm and beautiful and full of light. And then he wrote about losing it. About waking up one morning in the old house, the ugly house, the one with the beige walls and the linoleum floors. About looking at the wall where the door should have been and finding nothing. About realizing that everything he loved had disappeared. Claire, he wrote, I don't know how to explain this. I don't know if you believe me. I don't know if I believe me. But I saw it. I was there. And now it's gone, and I don't know how to get it back. You built it. You made it beautiful. And I never told you how much it meant to me. I never told you how much you meant to me. I was too busy being a selfish bastard to see what was right in front of me. He went on like that for another page and a half. Apologies and confessions and desperate pleas for me to come back. He said he was seeing a therapist. He said he was trying to get better. He said he loved me, that I read the whole thing. I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, the letter spread out in front of me, and I read every word. And when I was done, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the urge to call him and make everything better. I felt angry. Not the cold, steady anger I'd been carrying around for weeks. This was something new. Hot and sharp and immediate. I was angry at Mark for writing this letter, for putting this burden on me, for making me responsible for his feelings even after I'd walked away. I was angry at him for talking about the house like it was some magical thing that had just appeared, like I hadn't spent years working on it while he ignored me. I was angry at him for saying he loved me now, when it was too late. Most of all, I was angry at him for making me remember that I had been doing so well. I had been moving on, building a new life, not thinking about the past. And then he sent this letter, and suddenly I was back in the house, back in the marriage, back in the years of loneliness and frustration and quiet despair. The memories flooded back, sharp and painful. The nights I spent painting alone while he was at meetings. The weekends I spent at the hardware store while he went golfing. The way he would come home and look at my work and say, "Nice," and then disappear into his office. I had erased all of that. I had put it in a box and locked it away. And now Mark had opened the box, and everything was spilling out. That I was about to tear the letter up when I noticed something at the bottom of the last page. A postscript. Mark's handwriting was even messier here, barely legible. That I found the toolbox, he wrote. I went to the garage and I found it. It was in the drawer, just like you said. I didn't even know we had a toolbox. I opened it and there were all these tools inside. A hammer, a level, a tape measure. A bunch of stuff I didn't recognize. I held the hammer in my hand and I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like such an idiot. I started trying to fix things. The kitchen cabinet was sticking, so I got the screwdriver and I tried to fix it. I made it worse. The door fell off. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the door, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to put it back together. I thought about you. I thought about how you would have known exactly what to do. You would have fixed it in 5 minutes and moved on to the next thing. You were always fixing things. And I never helped. I never even watched it. I'm learning now. I'm learning how to fix things. It's slow and it's frustrating and I make a lot of mistakes. But I'm doing it. I'm trying. I don't know if you'll ever come back. I don't know if you even want to. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be someone worth coming back to. I don't want to find the door anymore. I want to build it myself. I read the postscript 3 times. Then I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I wasn't going to throw it away. I wasn't going to reread it every day. But I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't received it. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But there was something else too. Something I didn't want to acknowledge. A tiny flicker of hope, buried deep under layers of resentment and exhaustion. I didn't want to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what had kept me in that marriage for 7 years, believing things would get better, believing Mark would change. But the letter was different. Mark wasn't asking me to fix things. He wasn't asking me to come back and save him. He was telling me he was trying to save himself. That was new. That was something I'd never seen from him. I didn't know what to do with it. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went to work. The gallery was quiet that afternoon. Sandra was in her office, doing whatever Sandra did when she wasn't micromanaging me. The intern, a nervous girl named Lena, was rearranging the display shelves for the 3rd time. I sat behind the counter, staring at the wall, trying not to think about Mark. Are you okay? Lena asked. She was hovering near the counter, her hands twisting together. You look upset. I'm fine, I said automatically. Are you sure? Because you've been sitting there for an hour and you haven't moved. And you're not even looking at your phone. That's usually all you do. I blinked at her. I look at my phone a lot, all the time, she said. You're always scrolling through something. Photos, mostly. Photos of a house. It's a really nice house, by the way. Did you do all that work yourself? I felt something twist in my chest. Lena had been working at the gallery for a month, and she had noticed the photos on my phone. The photos of the house. The renovations. The years of work I'd documented, hoping someone would notice. A near stranger had noticed. Mark hadn't. Yeah, I said. I did most of it. That's amazing, she said. I can't even hang a picture without it falling down. It's not that hard, I said. You just need the right tools. I showed her the photos. I couldn't help myself. I scrolled through the gallery, showing her the before and after shots, explaining the process. The kitchen, before it was renovated, with the ugly cabinets and the broken tile. The bathroom, with the cracked shower and the peeling linoleum. The living room, with the beige walls and the sagging bookshelf. And then the after. The modern kitchen with the marble countertops. The bathroom with the rain shower head and the heated floors. The living room with the built-in bookshelves and the cozy reading nook. I did it all myself, I said, the words coming out more defensively than I intended. Well, I hired a contractor for the big stuff. The electrical, the plumbing. But I did most of the design work. I picked all the materials. I painted, I sanded, I built furniture. It took years. Lena was staring at the photos with wide eyes. This is incredible, she said. You built all of this. I built it for him, I said. The words came out bitter. My husband. He wanted a nice house, and I built it for him. And he didn't even notice. The silence that followed was heavy. Lena looked uncomfortable, like she'd stumbled into something she hadn't meant to find. I'm sorry, she said. That's really unfair. Yeah, I said. It is. I closed the photos and put my phone away. I didn't want to look at them anymore. I didn't want to remember the hours I'd spent making a home for someone who didn't appreciate it. But the images were burned into my mind. The kitchen. The bathroom. The reading nook. The French doors. The door that Mark thought had disappeared, that I had been so focused on how much he hadn't noticed that I'd never stopped to wonder why he remembered it now. He had seen the house I built. He had loved it. He just hadn't loved me. Or maybe he had, in his own way, and he just hadn't known how to show it. That I didn't want to make excuses for him. I had spent years making excuses for him, telling myself he was busy, he was stressed, he would come around eventually. He never did. But the letter. The letter was different. The letter was a man who had finally seen what he'd lost, and he was terrified. I spent the rest of my shift in a fog. Sandra came out of her office and barked some orders at me, and I nodded along without really hearing her. Lena kept glancing at me with worried eyes. I ignored her. I was too busy thinking about the letter. Too busy thinking about the toolbox. Too busy thinking about Mark, standing in the garage, holding a hammer, not knowing what to do. He was learning. He was trying. He was doing the work I had begged him to do for years. I went home that night and sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, the letter in my hands, reading it again. The anger was fading, replaced by something I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel sorry for him. I didn't want to hope. But I couldn't help it. The letter had opened a door in my own heart, and I didn't know how to close it. I thought about what I wanted. Not what Mark wanted. Not what anyone else wanted. What I wanted. I wanted a home. Not a house, not a renovation project, but a home. I wanted to feel safe and loved and seen. I wanted to stop running. I wanted to stop hiding. The apartment was a start. It was small and ugly and temporary. But it was mine. And I could make it mine. I didn't have to build a palace. I just had to build a place where I could live. I went to bed that night and I made a decision. I wasn't going back to Mark. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I wasn't going to run away either. I was going to stand my ground. I was going to build my own life, on my own terms. And if Mark wanted to be part of it, he was going to have to earn it. The next morning, I woke up and I felt different. The heaviness was still there, but it was lighter. I had a direction. I had a purpose. I was going to take care of myself, for the first time in years that I went to the hardware store and bought a small tool kit. A hammer, a screwdriver, a tape measure. Basic stuff. I brought it back to my apartment and I looked at it, sitting on the kitchen counter. It wasn't much. It wasn't the toolbox I'd left behind. But it was mine. That I took a deep breath and started fixing things. I started with the kitchen. The kitchen in my new apartment was a joke. A single countertop, a hot plate, a mini fridge that hummed so loudly I could hear it from the bedroom. The cabinets above the counter were crooked, the doors hanging at odd angles. The faucet dripped. The drawers didn't close all the way. It was a disaster, exactly the kind of challenge I used to love. That I opened my new tool kit and laid everything out on the counter. Hammer, screwdriver, tape measure, level. A box of screws and nails. A roll of duct tape because I wasn't naive enough to think I could do this with just the fancy stuff. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the tools, and I felt something shift inside me. This was familiar. This was comfortable. This was the part of myself I'd buried under years of resentment and exhaustion. The first thing I fixed was the faucet. It was a simple job, just a washer that needed replacing. I turned off the water, took apart the handle, swapped out the washer, and put it all back together. 5 minutes, tops. I turned the water back on and watched the drip stop. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. I had done something. I had fixed something. I had taken a broken thing and made it whole. That I moved on to the cabinet doors. They were crooked because the hinges were loose. I tightened them with the screwdriver, adjusted the alignment, and closed them one by one. They still weren't perfect, but they were better. They closed smoothly, without that annoying screech they'd been making for weeks. I stepped back and looked at my work. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The apartment started to feel different after that. It wasn't just a dump anymore. It was a place I was making mine. I went back to the hardware store and bought a can of paint, a cheerful yellow that reminded me of the reading nook I'd built in the other house. I painted the walls over the weekend, covering the faded yellow with something brighter and cleaner. It took 2 coats and a lot of patience, but when I was done, the apartment looked almost cheerful. That I bought a small rug at a thrift store, a colorful thing with patterns that didn't match anything else in the apartment. I hung up a few prints on the walls, cheap reproductions of paintings I'd always loved. I found a second-hand armchair that was worn and comfortable and put it in the corner by the window. It wasn't much. It wasn't the house I'd built before. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. Lena came over one evening, the first visitor I'd had since I moved in. She stood in the middle of the studio, turning in a slow circle, taking everything in. "This is amazing," she said. "You did all this in 2 weeks, most of it," I said. "The paint was the hard part." "It looks like a real home," she said. "Like a place someone actually lives in." "Thanks," I said. "That's the goal." We ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I didn't have a table yet. Lena asked me about the renovations I'd done on the old house, and I found myself telling her more than I'd planned. I told her about the French doors, the reading nook, the balcony I'd added off the bedroom. I told her about the rain shower head and the soft close cabinets. I told her about the years I'd spent, alone, making a house into a home. "It sounds like you really loved doing that," she said. "That I did," I said. "I loved it more than anything. It was the only thing that made me feel like I was good at something." "So why did you stop?" I didn't have an answer for her. I had stopped because Mark had left me. I had stopped because the house felt empty and pointless after he was gone. I had stopped because I couldn't bear to look at all the work I'd done and remember that it hadn't been enough to make him stay. "I don't know," I said. "I guess I just lost the motivation." Lena nodded like she understood. She was young and optimistic, and she hadn't been through the kind of disappointment that makes you give up on things. I envied her a little. I remembered being her age, full of energy and hope, believing that hard work would always pay off. I didn't believe that anymore. But I was starting to believe in something else. I was starting to believe in myself. The next week, I got a second letter from Mark. This one was shorter, less desperate. He told me about his therapy sessions, how he was learning to sit with his feelings instead of pushing them away. He told me about the house, how he'd started fixing it himself. He'd painted the living room. He'd replaced the linoleum in the hallway. He'd fixed the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom. I'm not good at it, he wrote. I make a lot of mistakes. I've ruined 2 paintbrushes and I don't even know how. I had to watch 3 YouTube videos just to figure out how to change a light bulb. But I'm doing it. I'm learning. I'm starting to understand why you loved it so much. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the first one. I didn't know what to make of it. A part of me was proud of him, the same part that had always wanted him to notice the things I did. Another part of me was suspicious. Mark had always been good with words. He knew how to say the right thing, how to make promises he couldn't keep. I didn't want to be fooled again. But there was something different about these letters. They were raw, unpolished, full of admissions of failure. Mark wasn't trying to impress me. He was just telling me the truth, as far as he could see it. And that was harder to dismiss. That I didn't write back. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to open that door, not yet. But I stopped putting the letters in the drawer without reading them. I started reading them more carefully, looking for signs of real change. The third letter came 2 weeks later. Mark had found a job in construction. Not a desk job, not managing anything, but actual construction. He was working on a crew, doing demolition, tearing down walls and hauling debris. He wrote about the physical exhaustion, the sore muscles, the dust and the noise. He wrote about the satisfaction of swinging a sledgehammer, of breaking something down to build it up again. I never understood why you liked this so much, he wrote. I used to think it was just a hobby, something you did to pass the time. But I get it now. There's something honest about it. You make a mistake, you see it right away. You fix it, and it's done. There's no hiding, no pretending. It's just you and the work. I read that paragraph 3 times. Mark had never talked about anything like this before. He had never shown interest in the process, only the result. He had never understood why I spent so many hours in the hardware store, why I came home covered in sawdust and paint, why I was always so tired but so happy. He was starting to understand. It was too late for us, probably. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. But I couldn't ignore the letters. They were evidence of something I'd never expected to see, Mark, changing. That I went to see the house. That it was a stupid decision. I knew it was a stupid decision. But I couldn't help myself. I drove to the old neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon, parked a block away, and walked the rest of the way. The house looked different from the outside. The front porch, which had been sagging for years, was fixed. The flower beds, which I'd always neglected, were planted with fresh flowers. The windows were clean, the shutters freshly painted. I stood on the sidewalk and stared at the house. It was the same house I'd left, the same beige exterior, the same ugly roof. But it looked different. It looked cared for. I was about to turn around and leave when the front door opened. Mark stepped out, and he saw me immediately. He froze, his hands still on the door handle, his eyes wide with surprise. Claire, he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in a while. I didn't expect you. I was in the neighborhood, I said. It was a lie, and we both knew it. He stepped off the porch and walked toward me. He looked different. Leaner, somehow. His arms were tanned, his hands rougher than I remembered. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, not his usual work clothes. There was sawdust in his hair. I'd been fixing things, he said, gesturing back at the house. You can see. It's not great, but it's better. I can see that, I said. We stood there in awkward silence. I didn't know what to say. I'd been so focused on leaving, on building my own life, that I hadn't thought about what would happen if I actually saw him again. "Want to come in?" he asked. "I can show you what I've done. It's not much, but it's something." I should have said no. I should have turned around and walked away. But I didn't. I nodded, and he led me inside. The living room was the first thing I saw. It was different. The beige walls were gone, replaced by a soft gray. The floor was new, the old linoleum replaced with something that looked like wood. The lumpy couch was gone, replaced by a simple, comfortable one that I painted it myself, he said. I had to do it twice because I messed up the first time. But it's good now. I think it's good. It's good, I said. It was more than good. It was a transformation. Mark had transformed this room from something ugly and forgotten into something livable. He showed me the kitchen next. It was the same kitchen I remembered, but it was different. The cabinets, which had been hanging crooked for years, were straight. The countertops were clean, the sink spotless. There was a new faucet, a modern one with a pull-down sprayer. I had to watch a lot of videos for that, he said, pointing at the faucet. I almost gave up 3 times. But I figured it out. We went upstairs. The master bedroom was a work in progress, with fresh paint on the walls but no furniture yet. The bathroom was fully renovated, a new shower with a rain shower head, and I felt a pang of something complicated when I saw it. "This used to be a dream of yours, right?" Mark asked. "The rain shower head. You were always talking about it." "Not always," I said. "Just sometimes." He nodded. "I remember." I didn't listen. But I remember. I didn't know what to say. He had remembered. He had taken something I'd wanted and made it real, even if it was too late. We went back downstairs, and Mark made coffee in his new kitchen. It was awkward and strange, 2 strangers sharing a cup of coffee in a house that used to be ours. But it wasn't painful. It was almost hopeful. "I've been in therapy," he said, breaking the silence. "I don't know if I told you. I'm learning a lot about myself. About what I did wrong. About why I did it." "You don't have to explain," I said. "I'm not here to judge you." "I know," he said. "But I want to tell you anyway. I want you to know that I understand now. What I did to you. How I made you feel." He told me everything. His therapist had helped him see the patterns, the way he'd been emotionally absent for years. He'd realized that he'd used work as an escape, a way to avoid dealing with his own insecurities. He'd pushed me away because he was afraid of being vulnerable. And when he started getting close to Diane, it wasn't because he didn't love me. It was because he didn't love himself. "The affair wasn't your fault," he said. "I want you to know that. It was my weakness, my selfishness. I was trying to fill a hole I didn't even know was there. And I hurt you in the process. I hurt you more than anything." I listened to him. I didn't interrupt. I let him say everything he needed to say. And when he was done, I realized something: that I wasn't angry anymore. I'd spent so long being angry, holding on to the resentment like a shield. But the shield had gotten heavy. It had weighed me down for years. And now, sitting in this house with Mark, seeing the evidence of his change, the anger was fading. It was being replaced by something else. Acceptance, maybe. Or forgiveness. "I forgive you," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. But I forgive you." Mark looked at me, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he said. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," I said. "But I need to move on. And I can't do that if I'm holding on to all this anger." We sat in silence for a while, drinking our coffee. The house was quiet, peaceful. It felt like a home, not a project. Mark had done that. He had taken something broken and fixed it. He'd done it without me. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I don't know if I've said that. But I'm proud of you." He smiled, a small, uncertain smile. "Thanks," he said. "That means a lot." I left the house an hour later. I walked back to my car, and I didn't look back. But this time, it wasn't because I was running away. It was because I was ready to move forward that I went home to my apartment. It was small and imperfect, but it was mine. I looked around at the yellow walls, the thrift store rug, the crooked cabinets I still needed to fix. And I felt a sense of peace that I had come a long way. I'd left a marriage, built a new life, and started healing. I'd learned to take care of myself, to stand on my own 2 feet. I'd learned that I didn't need someone else to complete me. I was enough on my own. I sat down on the floor, pulled out my phone, and started scrolling through the photos of the house. The house I'd built, the house I'd left behind. I looked at the before and after shots, the progress over the years, the evidence of all the work I'd done. And I realized something, that I didn't need the house. I didn't need Mark. I didn't need anyone. I had everything I needed right here, in this small apartment, in this new life I was building for myself. That the future was uncertain. I didn't know what was going to happen with Mark. I didn't know if we would ever reconcile, or if we would just become strangers who once knew each other. I didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But for the first time in years, I was excited to find out that the weeks after my visit to the house were strange. I felt lighter, like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying for years. But I also felt unmoored, drifting without a clear direction. I'd spent so long being angry at Mark, so long defining myself by my resentment, that I didn't know who I was without it. I went to work, came home, fixed things around the apartment, and waited for something to happen. Nothing happened. That I started to realize that waiting was its own kind of prison. I'd spent years waiting for Mark to notice me, to appreciate me, to love me the way I wanted to be loved. And now I was waiting again, waiting for some sign that my life was moving forward. I didn't want to wait anymore. I wanted to act. I started with small things. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I joined a book club at the local library, even though I hadn't read a book in years. I started going for walks in the park near my apartment, just to get out of the house and see the world. The pottery class was a disaster. I was terrible at it. My first pot collapsed on the wheel, a muddy mess that the instructor gently suggested I start over. My second pot was lopsided, my third too thin. But I kept going. There was something satisfying about the process, the feel of the clay in my hands, the focus required to shape it into something recognizable. By the end of the first session, I had a tiny, misshapen bowl that I was absurdly proud of. The book club was better. The women in the group were warm and welcoming, a mix of retirees and young professionals and stay-at-home moms. They talked about the book with passion and intelligence, and I found myself actually enjoying the conversations. I started reading more, rediscovering the pleasure of losing myself in a story. It had been years since I'd done that. I'd been too busy being a wife to be a person. That I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been when I was married, the one who had slowly disappeared under layers of duty and obligation. A new self. A self I was still figuring out. The fourth letter from Mark came a month after my visit. It was different from the others. There were no apologies, no desperate pleas for me to come back. Instead, it was a simple update. He'd finished painting the bedroom. He'd installed a new bookshelf in the living room. He'd started a garden in the backyard, planting the flowers I'd always wanted. That I think I understand now, he wrote. Why you loved it so much. It's not about the result. It's about the process. It's about taking something broken and making it whole. It's about the satisfaction of fixing something with your own hands. He wrote about his therapy, how he was learning to be comfortable with himself, how he was finally starting to forgive himself for everything he'd done wrong. He wrote about his job, how he was working on a construction crew and learning more every day. He wrote about the house, how it was starting to feel like a home. That I don't know if you're ever going to come back, he wrote. I've stopped hoping for that. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. But I wanted you to know that I'm okay. I'm doing the work. I'm becoming the person I should have been all along. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in the drawer with the others and went to the garden center. I bought a small potted plant, a succulent with thick green leaves, and I brought it home to my apartment. I put it on the windowsill, right next to the armchair, and I looked at it for a long time. That it was a small thing. A tiny plant in a tiny pot. But it was something I'd chosen for myself, something I was taking care of. It was a start that I started thinking about the future. About what I actually wanted, not what I thought I should want. I'd spent my whole life chasing other people's expectations. My mother wanted me to be a good wife. Mark wanted me to be a good homemaker. Society wanted me to be a success. But what did I want? I wanted to build things. I wanted to take broken spaces and make them beautiful. I wanted to create homes for people who needed them. I wanted to do the work that made me feel alive. That it was a vague ambition, more a feeling than a plan. But it was mine. I started researching ways to turn it into something real. I looked at interior design courses, renovation programs, apprenticeships with local contractors. I didn't have the money for formal education, and I didn't have the connections to get a foot in the door. But I had experience. I had years of practical knowledge, of trial and error, of figuring things out on my own. I started small. I offered to help a neighbor fix her leaky faucet. I helped another neighbor paint her kitchen. I volunteered at a local nonprofit that renovated homes for low-income families. I showed up on weekends, covered in dust and paint, and I worked alongside strangers who shared my passion for building things. That it was hard work. I came home exhausted, my hands blistered, my clothes ruined. But I loved it. I loved the feeling of making a difference, of taking something broken and making it whole. I loved the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, the simple satisfaction of a job well done. The nonprofit was run by a woman named Elena, a tough, no-nonsense architect who had been doing this work for decades. She took me under her wing, showing me the ropes, teaching me the skills I hadn't learned on my own. "You've got a good eye," she told me one afternoon, as we were tearing down a wall in a dilapidated house. "And you've got the work ethic. That's half the battle." "Thanks," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "I had a lot of practice." "That husband of yours," she said. "The one you left. He ever help you with this stuff?" "No," I said. "He was always too busy." "Too busy for you," she said. "I know the type. They don't see the value until it's gone." She was right. Mark hadn't seen the value of what I did until he lost it. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I was doing this for myself, not for him. I was building a life that was mine. That I started to get better at the work. I learned how to hang drywall, how to install tile, how to run basic wiring. I learned how to read blueprints, how to estimate materials, how to manage a project from start to finish. I learned the technical side of things, but I also learned the human side. I learned how to listen to people, how to understand what they needed, how to create spaces that worked for them. It was fulfilling in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't just building houses. I was building homes. I was helping people create a place where they could feel safe and loved and seen. It was the same thing I'd tried to do for Mark, but now I was doing it for people who actually appreciated it. The work filled a hole in me I hadn't even known was there. For years, I defined myself by my relationship, by my role as a wife. I'd poured all my energy into making someone else happy, and I'd lost myself in the process. Now I was defining myself by what I did, by the skills I was learning, by the impact I was making. It felt good. It felt right. Mark's letters kept coming. They were less frequent now, maybe once a month. He told me about his progress, his setbacks, his small victories. He told me about the garden, how the flowers were finally blooming. He told me about the bookshelf he'd built, the one he'd been so proud of. He told me about his therapy, how he was learning to be kind to himself. That I didn't write back. I wasn't ready for that. But I kept his letters, all of them, in the drawer by my bed. They were a reminder of how far we'd both come. One evening, I got a phone call from my mother. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since the day she'd called me at the diner. I let it go to voicemail, listening to her voice as it played through the speaker. Claire, it's Mom. I wanted to let you know that Mark called me. He said you two have been talking. He said you visited him. I just want to make sure you're okay. I know things have been hard. Please call me back. I didn't call her back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't have anything to say. My mother had always been more invested in my marriage than I was. She'd seen Mark as a catch, a successful man who could provide for me. She'd never understood why I was unhappy. She'd never seen the way he'd made me feel invisible. I was done explaining myself to her. I was done justifying my choices. I was done trying to earn her approval. I'd spent my whole life doing that, and it had gotten me nowhere. The next weekend, Elena asked me to help with a big project. A family had lost their home in a fire, and the nonprofit was rebuilding it from the ground up. I spent the weekend there, working alongside a team of volunteers, hauling lumber and nailing beams. It was exhausting, back-breaking work. But at the end of the weekend, I looked at the house, at the frame we'd built, and I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. This is what it's all about, Elena said, standing next to me. Building something from nothing. Giving people a place to start over. Yeah, I said. It's pretty great. You could do this professionally, you know, she said. You've got the skills. You've got the passion. You just need to get your name out there. I thought about it. I'd been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that I hadn't let myself dream about the future. But Elena was right. I could do this. I could build a career out of the thing I loved most. I started making a plan. I researched certifications, looked at business models, calculated the startup costs. It was daunting, but it was exciting. For the first time in years, I had a goal. I had something to work toward. That I was sitting in my apartment one evening, sketching out a business plan on a notepad, when my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then I picked up. Hey, I said. My voice was cautious, uncertain. Hey, he said. I didn't think you'd answer. Neither did I said. What's up? Nothing important, he said. I just wanted to hear your voice. It's been a while. Yeah, I said. It has. We talked for an hour. He told me about his job, how he was working on a new project, an office building downtown. He told me about the house, how the garden was growing, how he was finally learning to cook. He told me about his therapy, how he'd made a breakthrough, how he was learning to forgive himself. That I listened. I asked questions. I shared a little about my life, the work I was doing, the plan I was making. It was strange, talking to him like this. Like we were friends, not exes. Like we were starting over. I'm proud of you, he said at the end of the call. I know I've said that before. But I mean it. You're doing great. Thanks, I said. I'm proud of me too. We said goodnight and hung up. I sat there in the silence, my business plan in front of me, and I thought about what had just happened. I had talked to Mark without feeling angry or resentful. I had talked to him like a person, not an enemy. Maybe that was progress. Maybe that was healing. I didn't know. But it felt right. The next week, I got a call from Elena. She had a new project for me, a house that needed a complete renovation. A family with 3 kids, not enough money, and a house that was falling apart around them. She wanted me to lead the project. You ready for this? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. I spent the next month at the house. I worked alongside the family, teaching them basic skills, showing them how to fix things themselves. I painted walls, installed cabinets, laid floors. I designed the layout, chose the colors, made the decisions. It was my project, start to finish. The family was grateful. They thanked me every day, hugged me when I left, invited me to dinner. It was overwhelming, the warmth they showed me. I wasn't used to being appreciated like that. I wasn't used to being seen. The day the project was completed, I stood in the living room and looked at what I'd built. The walls were painted a warm cream, the floors a rich wood. The kitchen was modern and functional, the bedrooms cozy and comfortable. The family was there, laughing and crying, thanking me over and over. "You did this," the mother said, her eyes wet. "You did all of this." "Thank you," I said. "But you did the work too. This is your home now. You built it." It was true. They had learned. They had grown. They had taken something broken and made it whole. I had just shown them how. I drove home that evening, exhausted and happy. The sun was setting, the sky a beautiful orange and pink. I rolled down the window and let the cool air wash over me. I felt good. I felt complete that I had done this. I had built something from nothing. I had helped a family create a home. And I had done it without Mark. Without his approval, without his help, without his presence. I had done it on my own. That was the moment I realized I didn't need him. Not anymore. I had built a life for myself, a life I was proud of. I had become the person I always wanted to be. And I had done it all by myself. I went home that night and I sat in my armchair, looking at the small succulent on the windowsill. It had grown, the leaves bigger and greener than when I'd bought it. I touched the leaves gently, feeling their smooth, cool surface. That I had grown too. I had grown more in the past few months than I had in the 7 years I was married. I had learned to trust myself, to value myself, to believe in myself. That I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever talk to Mark again, if I would ever see him again, if we would ever reconcile. But I knew I would be okay. I knew I could handle whatever came next. I got up and walked to the drawer by my bed. I opened it and looked at the letters, all of them, lined up in a neat stack. I picked up the first one, the desperate, rambling one, and I read it again. That "Stop trying to find the door," I'd said. "Start looking for the toolbox." He had done that. He had looked for the toolbox. He had found it, and he was using it. He was building his own life, the way I was building mine. We weren't together anymore. We might never be together again. But we were both building something better. Something stronger. Something that would last. I put the letters back in the drawer and closed it. I was ready for the next chapter. Whatever it was, I knew I could handle it. I had the skills. I had the tools. I had everything I needed to build the life I wanted. And I wasn't going to wait anymore. I was going to build it. That I woke up on a Tuesday morning and realized I was happy. It wasn't a dramatic realization, not the kind that comes with fireworks or sweeping music. It was quiet and gradual, like the sun rising over a familiar horizon. I lay in bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, and I let myself feel it. The lightness in my chest, the absence of that constant low hum of anxiety that had been my companion for years. I was happy. Truly, genuinely happy. My apartment had become a home. The yellow walls were warm and welcoming, the thrift store rug soft under my bare feet. The armchair by the window was my favorite spot, where I sat in the mornings with my coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up. The small succulent on the windowsill had grown into a cluster of healthy green leaves, a testament to the care I'd given it. I had built this place, piece by piece. It was small and imperfect, but it was mine. The business was growing. After the renovation project with Elena, word had spread. People called me, neighbors of neighbors, friends of friends. They needed help with kitchens and bathrooms and basements that flooded every spring. I took on small jobs at first, things I could handle on my own. Then I started hiring helpers, other volunteers from the nonprofit who wanted to earn some extra money. I was running a real business, a proper renovation company, and it was thriving. I still worked with Elena when she needed me. We'd become friends, more than colleagues. She was blunt and practical, the kind of person who told you exactly what she thought, and I appreciated that about her. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She didn't pretend. She saw me for who I was, and she liked me anyway. "You're different," she said one afternoon, as we were reviewing plans for a new project. When I first met you, you were so closed off. Like you were waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Now you're more open. More confident. I was waiting, I said. I was waiting for someone to tell me I was good enough. And now I know I am. I don't need anyone to tell me. She nodded, satisfied. That's growth. That's real growth. Mark and I had started talking regularly. Not every day, not even every week, but often enough. The phone calls were long and unhurried, two people catching up, sharing the details of their lives. He told me about his job, his therapy, the house. I told him about my business, my projects, my plans. We didn't talk about the past, not really. We talked about the future. It was easier that way. He'd made progress. Real progress, the kind that showed in the way he spoke, the way he listened. He asked questions, thoughtful questions, the kind that showed he was paying attention. He remembered things I'd told him weeks ago, brought them up in conversation like they mattered to him, that I wasn't ready to trust him. I wasn't sure I ever would be. But I was starting to believe that he was becoming someone I could trust. Someone I could respect. Someone I could maybe, one day, love again. The thought didn't terrify me the way it used to. It didn't feel like a surrender, a retreat into the past. It felt like a choice, a conscious decision to open myself up to possibility. I wasn't running back to Mark. I was walking toward a future that might include him, if he continued to be the person he was becoming. The house was finished. Mark had done it, all of it. He'd renovated every room, fixed every broken thing, turned the ugly beige shell into something beautiful. He sent me photos, and I looked at them with a sense of pride. Not pride in myself, not this time. Pride in him. He had done the work. He had become the person he should have been all along. That I visited the house again on a Saturday afternoon. The weather was perfect, warm and sunny, the kind of day that made you want to be outside. I drove over without calling ahead, letting myself be spontaneous. It was something I'd never done before, always needing to plan and prepare and make sure everything was in order. But I was different now. I could be spontaneous. I could take risks. Mark was in the backyard when I arrived. He was kneeling in the garden, his hands covered in dirt, tending to the flowers. The garden was beautiful, full of color and life. I stood at the edge of the yard and watched him for a moment. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, his hair messy, his face relaxed. He looked content. He looked happy. Hey, I said, and he looked up, surprised. Claire, he said, getting to his feet. I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to see the garden, I said. The photos didn't do it justice. He smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes. It's my pride and joy, he said. I spend more time out here than I do inside. He showed me around. He pointed out the roses he'd planted, the lavender, the daisies. He told me about the soil he'd amended, the mulch he'd added, the hours he'd spent getting everything just right. He talked about the process with enthusiasm, the same enthusiasm I'd once had for my own projects. It was strange to see him like this, so engaged, so passionate. You've changed, I said, not meaning to say it out loud. He laughed, a little self-consciously. I had to, he said. I couldn't stay the same person. That person was miserable. And he made everyone around him miserable. You made me miserable, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement of fact. That I know, he said. I'm sorry. I know I've said that before, but I mean it. I'm sorry for all of it. For not seeing you. For not appreciating you. For taking you for granted. I know you're sorry, I said. I can see it. In everything you've done. We walked back to the house, and he showed me the inside. The living room was cozy and warm, the gray walls accented with colorful artwork. The kitchen was modern and functional, the cabinets straight, the counters clean. The bathroom was beautiful, the rain shower head gleaming. It was everything I'd once dreamed of. You built all of this, I said. That with a lot of help, he said. YouTube was my best friend. And the guy at the hardware store probably knows me by name now. It's amazing, I said. You did an amazing job. He looked at me, his eyes serious. I learned a lot, he said. I learned how hard it is. How much work goes into it. I never understood that before. I never understood why you were so tired, why you were so stressed. I just thought it was something you did, something you enjoyed. I didn't realize how much it took out of you. It was worth it, I said. It was always worth it. Was it, he asked. Was it worth it, even though I didn't appreciate it? I thought about it. The years of work, the exhaustion, the frustration. The nights I spent painting alone while he was at meetings. The weekends I spent at the hardware store while he went golfing. The way he'd come home and look at my work and say, "Nice," and then disappear into his office. Yes, I said. It was worth it. Not because of you. Because of me. Because I loved doing it. Because it made me feel alive. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand. I wish I'd seen that, he said. I wish I'd seen you. You see me now, I said. That yeah, he said. I do. I see you now. We stood there in the kitchen, looking at each other. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. I don't know what happens next, I said. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. I don't want to go back, he said. I want to go forward. I want to see where we can go from here. That's a lot of pressure, I said. On both of us. I know, he said. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to keep talking to me. To keep giving me a chance to show you who I am now. I looked at him. He was different. The man standing in front of me was not the man I'd married. He was better. Kinder. More aware. He'd done the work. He'd made the change. He'd earned the chance to show me who he was now. Okay, I said. I can do that. We sat in the living room and talked for hours. He told me about his therapy, the breakthroughs and setbacks. He told me about his job, the coworkers he'd befriended, the projects he'd worked on. He told me about the house, the challenges and triumphs, the things he'd learned that I told him about my business, the clients I'd worked with, the projects I'd completed. I told him about Elena, my mentor and friend. I told him about the pottery class and the book club and the small joys I'd discovered. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. The past was there, a shadow between us, but it didn't define us anymore. We defined ourselves. We defined the future. As I was leaving, he walked me to the door. The sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, the kind of sunset that made you feel hopeful. Thank you for coming, he said. It means a lot. Thank you for showing me, I said. Everything you've done. It's incredible. He smiled, that genuine smile again. Maybe one day, you'll see it as your home too, he said. Not because of me. Because of you. Because it's the house you helped build. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The words hung in the air between us, full of possibility. I got in my car and drove home, the sunset fading in my rearview mirror. I went back to my apartment. The yellow walls welcomed me, the thrift store rug soft under my feet. I sat in my armchair by the window, the succulent on the windowsill catching the last light of the day. I looked around at my home, the home I'd built for myself, and I felt a deep sense of peace that I had come a long way. I'd left a marriage that was destroying me, built a new life from scratch, and discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I'd learned to trust myself, to value myself, to believe in myself. I'd learned that I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was complete on my own. But I'd also learned that it was okay to let people in. It was okay to hope. It was okay to believe that people could change, that relationships could heal, that the future could be better than the past. That I didn't know what was going to happen with Mark. I didn't know if we would find our way back to each other, or if we would simply become friends who shared a history. But I knew I would be okay. I knew I could handle whatever came next. That I thought about the toolbox. The one I'd told Mark to look for, the one he'd found in the garage. I thought about all the tools inside it, the hammer and the level and the tape measure. I thought about how he'd held the hammer in his hands and didn't know what to do with it. And then I thought about how he'd learned. How he'd made mistakes and kept going. How he'd become someone who knew how to fix things. I had found my own toolbox too. It was inside me, all along, waiting to be used. The skills, the strength, the resilience. I just needed to open it. That I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos of the house. The before and after shots, the progress over the years. I looked at the reading nook, the French doors, the balcony. I looked at the kitchen and the bathroom and the garden. I looked at the evidence of all the work I'd done, all the love I'd poured into those spaces. And I realized something. I didn't need the house. I didn't need Mark. I didn't need anyone. I had everything I needed right here, in this small apartment, in this new life I was building for myself. But I could choose to let them in. I could choose to let Mark in, if he continued to be the person he was becoming. I could choose to let the house in, as a symbol of what we could build together. I could choose to let love in, even after everything. That it was my choice. It was always my choice. That I put down the phone and looked out the window. The city was alive with lights, the sky dark and full of stars. It was a beautiful night, full of possibility. I smiled, feeling the hope spread through me like warmth. I was ready for whatever came next. I had the tools. I had the skills. I had everything I needed to build the life I wanted. And I was going to build it.